Yo. Hey guys, welcome back to another amazing edition of the Best Practices Show podcast. Do you feel like you're working harder and harder and harder for less and less and less? Well, today we're going to show you one area where you can improve this and you can make more. It's called the Energy Quotient with Dr. Barrett Straub, our CEO. You do not want to miss this because this is a big part of your practice profitability that nobody talks about. So make sure you guys listen up. I hope you enjoy it. We'll see you soon. Hey guys, welcome back to the Best Practices Show podcast, where we got a special edition. All of them are kind of special because you're the program director of all the good things. Well, we've got Miranda Beeson who does a lot of those, but then also you do a great job of organizing the topics that are so hot. And today we're going to be talking about a very hot topic that comes up a lot. And we're going to label this one as the Energy Quotient, really how many days you work for free. And we're going to go deep dive into it because here's my question to you if you're a dentist listening. Do you feel like you're working harder and harder and harder than ever for nothing? Well, it's true in some cases, and we're going to help you reverse that trend. And a lot of it has to do with output. So why don't you open this up for us? And for those of you listening, this is Dr. Barrett Straub, who is our CEO, and he's the brains behind the operation. I'm just the fun guy.
Oh, you had a lot of brains as well. So output.
Yeah. Your
gross production is your output. And we don't love the idea of gross production being the best measure of success at all, because there's a couple of reasons. But it is your output, meaning your business outputted X amount of dollars of product in the form of gross production, as long as you're billing your full master fee. Now, the question is, how did I get to that number?
Right.
So the number itself, we can make judgments. That's that's big, or that's too small, or that's right where it should be. But really, we don't know yet because we don't know what it took to get there. So there's effort, and our effort gap really addresses how much effort, how much time, how much energy, how much blood, sweat, and tears did it take to get to your gross production. Mm-hmm. And you can have two different practices, both producing the same amount, where one dentist is feeling awesome and one is not because of the effort.
Right.
And really what we're talking about is profit margin.
Right. Yeah. And so the narrative in dentistry, if you've been doing it as long as I have or been in this industry, 30 years, gross production was always kind of the benchmark, how big is your practice? How busy are you? And that is not the case anymore. Right. It might show you overall opportunity. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like my first sales job. I learned how to do invoicing. So every time I sold something, I was invoicing things. Well, my boss is like, well, we have to collect that money. Right. You can invoice all day you want, but that's just paper.
Right.
So, and now what we're finding is it's exactly true. A lot of people can be producing the same amount, but one can have no money.
Yep.
And one can be doing really well. And that's why we want you to listen to this, because this is a very, very big deal in determining how healthy your practice is. Go a little bit deeper.
Right. Well, let's think about it. If we have gross production, let's say we have two dental practices, gross producing $1 million. Mm-hmm. One gets there with 1,000 patients doing $1,000 per patient.
Right.
Does that add up to $1 million? That adds up to $1 million.
It does.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
Andy's checking our math.
I think my quick math. Okay. You could have the other practice that needs $2,000. That needs 2,000 patients doing $500 per patient. They both get to $1 million.
And that's annual patient value.
Yeah, annual patient value.
But that's not annual patient value.
Gross production per patient, which is similar idea, and the numbers are close. But you can see that those are different. Right? One of those practices possibly worked 25% less. Mm-hmm. One of those practices worked less days. And so really, there's a difference in profit margin there.
Right.
And when you have a lower profit margin, meaning you're making less profit per procedure, per patient, per hour, you need to do more.
Right.
More. We need to add days. We have to work longer hours. We've got to churn and burn. We have to fit a lot more patients into these 4 or 5 days that we're practicing.
Right.
And what that does is, so we're going to introduce this energy quotient today. And really what the energy quotient does is symbolize how many days do I have to work for free, and free meaning without the potential of collecting income, in order to afford my lack of profit margin, in order to afford these write-offs or adjustments that I'm taking off the top. So basically, to get to that $1 million, how many days do I work for free just to have the right or the ability to produce $1 million?
Right.
And you can see when someone has a low energy quotient, the number of days working for free is less, and then the other one is high, they're going to feel differently about that same gross production.
Right. And we're going to go, I want you to put a pin in that because we're going to come back to that, but I want to add some color to this if you're listening. So let's take those two practices that are both producing $1 million.
Yeah.
One has twice as many patients. We could make an argument you need twice as many people working the admin area. You're seeing a higher volume. Now, what you didn't say also, or maybe you were pointing to, is you're writing off a third, which means you're collecting a lot less, which we're going to open up here in a second.
Right.
But you can see how they're equipped differently. I mean, one's moving.
Right.
It's moving fast. And you're also catering to a completely different patient base.
Right.
That is trained the same way as the other patients are.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because really what we didn't say is those two offices producing $1 million, we don't know what their net production is. And the net production is actually what they can collect.
Right.
And one that has a very low profit margin, they're going to write off 30-40%. So they're going to be able to collect, 60%, $600,000. The other practice that has a low energy quotient probably has a profit margin of 92%. They're only writing off 8%.
Right.
Their net production is way higher. So they're both at $1 million. One's making a lot more profit.
Right.
Doing it in less days, less effort, less energy. And you're right, because that gross production, you got to spend money to get to that.
Right.
And so you're going to spend money to produce your production. And then, so the gap between your production and your net production, we call it the effort gap. What's the difference, or the gap between how much you produce and how much of that production you can collect on?
Yeah.
Obviously, that's profit margin. We want that gap to be as small as is reasonable, because we want you to be able to collect money on your energy and time.
Yeah. And you're pointing to the tip of the iceberg. And if you've been listening to the podcast regularly, you know this is we're dissecting this because we're geeks about this. This is what we love talking about. One more thing that happens when you go in that direction of higher volume is you have less control. Insurance companies are now making decisions for you. You're probably seeing patients in the evening. You're equipping extra operatories. And a big reason why you went into this profession was that you could do it your way.
Right.
And so if you're stressed this far into the podcast, we're here to tell you there is a way out.
Right.
There's a very, very predictable way out, and it's called our GAPS method. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And we're actually going to do a 2-part webinar series where we'll walk you through that whole process. But today we're going to be talking about the effort gap. So take us through the next step of this.
Yeah. So we talked about the effort gap, and it starts with gross production, the gap, and then you have your write-offs, your adjustments, your write-offs, all of that stuff. And then you have your net production, and that's what you actually can collect on. That's your greatest revenue potential, net production. And that's what we calculate collections against. What percentage of net production did you actually collect? But let's talk about when that gap between gross and net production is large. And it's large due to what we just said: elective write-offs, charitable write-offs, PPO adjustments, membership fee discounts, all of that goes in there. And when that gap is big, our profit margin shrinks. And when we have a small profit margin, the energy it takes to maintain revenue goes up. Meaning you have to do more, do it faster, do it more efficiently, do it longer, etc. So the ACT energy quotient really is a data point. It's in the number of days, so it'll be a number, and it's going to be the number of days that you worked for free in order to earn your collectible amount. And how we do this, you add up all your adjustments. So you're going to start with your PPO adjustments if you're contracted. What's that dollar value? And it's also going to be a percentage, but you're going to put it in a dollar value. So if you're $1 million and you write off 40% to PPOs, you're $600,000. So you have $400,000 in PPOs. Then you add to that anytime you guaranteed service or charitable dentistry, all that. So you get a dollar value. Let's say it's $400,000 or $500,000. Now you take that and you divide it by your production per day, gross production per day. And that's simple. I produced X amount and I worked this many days, and therefore I produced how much per day.
Yep.
I worked 200 days. I produced $1 million. Do the math.
Right.
Okay. So now you take your total value of your adjustments and you divide that by your production per day, and you get a day value of number of days that you worked without any effort you're not going to get any money for those days. So when our practices that have mitigated or managed their profit margin, and it's a very manageable profit margin, that number annually is 8-10%. So that might be 10-20 days. Our larger PPO practices that are really struggling with profit margin, that's going to be 30-40%. That might be 50, 60, 70 days. We've even seen as much as 90 or 90 days. So we have a lot. Now, what does that mean? 60 days. Well, let's say if you work 16 days a week, you're working, the first 3 or 4 months of the year for nothing before you can even collect $1.
You're not collecting any money.
Now that's spread out over the year, so it's not
right.
Like, it's not like you get to April and you're like, okay, we can start. But
right.
It's saying that 30, so if your effort gap is 35%, we see that all the time. 35, and another way to look at it is 35% of every hour, 35% of every day, 35% of every week, month, year, you're doing it for free.
Right. Right.
And so we never say we want your energy quotient to be 0. Because we want you to be charitable. We know you're going to have guaranteed service. Many of you are going to have some level of PPO, but we want to find the energy quotient. We had To the Top Study Club in here a few months ago, and we calculated this. And I remember the question was, how does that feel?
Right.
And some that were 30-40% were visibly upset,
right,
as they should have been. So like, wow, I didn't realize my profit margin was so poor. And because when you're doing that, you're working so hard, and you're like, I am working so hard, and 40% of that effort, I don't get any remuneration, or I don't get any revenue on. That feels bad.
It does.
And some people are like, I'm at 8-9%. I work 8 days. I'm like, and that feels good because I know what that's from. It's because I gave it away to them and they were in need. I did some pro bono and I do this, and yeah, that feels good. And we're like, great. So it's not necessarily like you should. It's no benchmark like you should be at 20 days or less, or it's more a personal like, how does that feel?
Yeah, and so if you're a dentist listening, wherever you start, you're just going to improve it and make it better. So if you're a dentist who's at the 40%, like I'm writing off 42%, you do Barrett's math, you're like, this is not good. The whole idea is to go to 32%, then to 22%. This is what we do.
Yeah.
We reduce that. And you might go all the way. We don't make people go fee for service, but we have a lot of people in this room that go completely fee for service, and they go, wow, I just I just got rid of all that stuff. And so if you think fee-for-service practice is dead, you are greatly mistaken. Prior to the pandemic, most experts in the industry estimated it at 6%. Now most of them estimate it at 13%. So fee-for-service is climbing if you choose that route. Now I want to go back to a couple things. Now again, you don't have to do that, but you could greatly lessen the influence of PPOs in your practice. You mentioned effort gap. There's two things that made me cringe. Number one, if you're a dentist listening to this, you care about your crowns, your margins, and you don't have, it's physically stressful to do this dentistry. You're not just slapping crowns in. So that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
That's one thing. You don't have the ability to give a lot more effort. Number two, if you're older like me, you get past that 45, years old mark, you are officially or pretty close playing the back nine. So the whole idea of adding more days for free, that's just out of equity with where I'm at. I don't have a day to waste.
Absolutely.
And according to the ADA Health Policy Institute, the average dentist now works the equivalent of 220 days a year, which is way up from the last time that they pulled this number. So dentists are working harder and harder and harder for less and less and less.
And let's just think about the word energy. It's long been known, and we advise this in our coaching, like set up your day. What's a perfect day? When do you want to do your more intricate techniques? Most people choose the mornings, the afternoons, your energy levels drop.
Right.
So our whole quality of care is partially dependent on managing our energy level. When we have more energy, we're just better dentists.
Right.
And so the energy quotient is important, and we want to make sure that you can manage it. Now, think about this. If you have a high energy quotient, meaning you're giving away a lot of days for free, versus when you lower that, what happens? You make more money, but you can also work less.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So you might, some people would say, I'm still going to work the same days and I'm going to improve my profit margin, and therefore I'm going to be a lot more profitable. Other people are going to say, yeah, I'm going to do some of that, but now I can actually work under 220 days. I can take those 3 week-long family vacations a year. I can do this, and I'm still going to make the same or more. So it's not just about money. It's actually not, money doesn't even come first. It's about like what feels best for your life and your practice. And it is almost universal that we find our clients that's profit margins are a little out of whack. They always feel lack of energy, meaning they're just running hard. And they're like, I'm tired. I'm burnt out. I go home and I'm not myself. I'm working too long, too many days. I have to go in on my days off to do administrative tasks. I thought there would be more money, so it's not even like it's worth it. And then once we calculate their profit margin, look at their effort gap, look at their energy quotient, it becomes very obvious why they feel that. And it has all to do with profit margin and PPO adjustments, lack of collections. There's 4 gaps that can add to this. Quite often the biggest one is the PPO write-offs. Yeah,
and we have many people that sit in this room, clients, and if you're a client listening, I've heard them say it from their own. I hate looking at these numbers. I don't enjoy it, and we make them fill it out once a month. And the same people that say I hate it come back a quarter later and go, look at that, it's green now. Like I actually got money now. And that's where the fun comes in. It's not even about money, like you said. It's about looking at the data, determining what it means, and then literally like making a better practice and a better life month by month by month, and you just feel better.
Yeah. It's interesting because what you just said, our clients come to us and profitability is always part of it. It has to be. But what they focus on isn't like, yeah, I'm just so profitable. I got all this money I'm investing. It's about like, I'm so much more profitable. And what that has allowed me to do is I'm leaving work at 3 on Wednesdays and Thursdays. I went to 7 to 2. I'm reducing my day's work by 14 days next year, and I'm making more money. It's, so what they're beaming and their eyes are sparkling. It's about the life and the time. You always say time is a new rich, and it is our most valuable asset.
right? And they can take better CE.
Yeah.
They can breathe a little bit better. It's about equity. You know, it's about the effort and the equity. And if the effort and the equity don't match up from your perspective, you feel out of equity.
Right.
And you start to, you know, people ask you about being a dentist. You're like, I don't know if I would tell you to be a dentist, you know? But the ones that have equity with their effort, you can see it in their face. They're like, no, it's a great profession. I get to choose my hours. I have more time. I would guess that the dentistry's better.
Yeah.
You know, the patient care is better. They move slower on a daily basis. I would argue that their team relationships are better. Their job satisfaction is better, don't you think?
Job satisfaction, life satisfaction, happiness at work, more time, which is number one.
Right.
Team culture, because our team doesn't want to run ragged either.
Right.
They want work-life balance. They want job satisfaction. They want to leave work feeling not burned out. Guess what also happens when we have a little more profit and a little more time? We become a better boss. We become a better business leader. We become more charitable. And I think we do better dentistry. I know this is a taboo subject about like my quality of care is always the same. I've been a dentist for 20 years. That would be a lie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a better dentist when I'm not burned out.
Right.
I'm a better dentist when I'm not doing, you know, a molar endo at 4:30 p.m. on Friday.
Right.
I'm a better dentist when I have more control over my time.
Right.
More time to spend with patients, more time to do the things I need to do. And so quality of care goes up.
Yeah. And really, if we want to get very philosophical, there's a certain philosophy around money. Money doesn't really give you joy.
Yeah.
What it does is it provides you options. If you can make an income, you can choose better care. You can choose a better place to live. You can choose your time more wisely. And I think a lot of that philosophy exists in dentistry. When you have, when you have profitability, you can choose. You can choose a better lab. You can choose not to see a patient. You can choose not to work on a Friday.
Yeah.
You can choose to take a great course. You can choose to buy better technology. You just have more choice.
Yeah.
It's not about getting a nicer car or a second home or anything like that. Sometimes when you're more profitable, and we've learned this firsthand, you can say no to stuff. You're like, nope, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
I remember there were old days of Act Dental, like when we were just trying to get going and I'd say yes to everything just because it created revenue streams.
Right.
And then you realize that's not really smart.
Yeah.
So we're here to tell you that this does work. And when you can analyze these numbers, what's really fun though is the insight that comes from the client. Yeah. They go, why am I doing this? You did a segmentation, session with our To the Top Study Club last Friday. Yeah. And you're just like, why? Just get rid of those two. Why are you even doing that? And a lot of times dentists are good-hearted people. They're doing it because they feel like they have to they know these people, and what we're encouraging people to do is just make better choices around your business, and you'll see day by day, week by week, month by month, things just feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? There is a growing challenge in dentistry. And it's usually presented in a DSO versus fee for service, or out of network, in network, or work 7 days a week versus work 3 days a week, or work 10 hours a day versus work 7 hours a day. And it's presented in these model changes. But really what no one's saying other than us is it's really about profit margin. And when your profit margin is out of whack, you are forced to do business strategies that you don't want to do.
Right.
And when your profit margin is managed and it's profitable, now you have a lot of options.
Right.
Options to run the practice the way you want. Options for that practice to deliver the life you want. Options to have time and a life. And so really all these other narratives out there are all about profit margin. And when you control your profit margin, you have ultimate control of your practice.
Right. And the person you probably speak to the most about your profit margin, and I'm not here to slam your dental accountant, or maybe I am, and I think there's a handful of really good ones out there. But the truth of a dental accountant is they don't know how much your gross production was. They don't even ask you how many days did you work? How many insurances are you contracted with? You're talking about this thing called profit with somebody who's looking at your P&L.
Right.
and your debt service and other things like that, and telling you got to pay taxes, which we paid taxes today.
Right.
You know what I mean? Type of a thing. And they're saying maybe you should buy cheaper supplies. Maybe you should add a day. Maybe you should. And really, I don't know if that's the best strategy, because they're not even paying attention to the third that you're not collecting on the top of it. Right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so true. So the CPA's advice is going to start with revenue, which is the top of your P&L. Well, by the time we get to that in our GAPS model, we've skipped over the effort gap, which is gross production, net production. We skipped over the collections gap, which is how much of your net production did you not collect? You should have. And now we're starting with revenue. And so profit margin, that's only your overhead is only a part of your profit margin. And really the hardest to adjust. And we have some tools that we're going to present to you in this GAPS virtual workshops to be able to say, like, hey, my overhead is high. Am I actually spending too much?
Right.
Or is my profit margin out of whack? And that's why I have an 80% overhead.
Yeah.
And there's a very easy way to do that, but we have to understand how cash flows in and out of a practice. And that P&L is only 1/4 of the equation.
Right. And I say this all the time. I say it on the podcast. You know how you build an amazing practice? Just one patient at a time, one day at a time.
Yep.
So if you're stressed, listen to this. You're like, that's my practice. Once you get these tools, you can take a look at it and go, wow, that wasn't a great month. Okay, well, how do we change that? Then you go to the next month. You're like, wow, that was a little bit better. Then month 3, you start to know more about your business. You're like, okay, now I'm not doing that. Month 4, you're like, wow, I'm actually netting quite a bit more than I did in month 1. It's called progress. It's one step at a time. I'm here to say that what you're saying is absolutely true. And I want you to talk about the virtual webinar and the tools. Like, what are we going to be doing?
Yeah. And I'll say 20 years of owning my own private practice and multitude of visits with CPAs and accountants and thinking through goals and looking at P&Ls. No one could ever answer why. Why is that number not higher? Or why is that number the number it is? And why do I feel like that number is not big enough? And where did all the money go? And why isn't my profit more? And why did I pay that much on taxes? It doesn't feel like I should have paid that much on taxes. And I've never talked to a dentist that didn't share some of these same internal experiences. And come and join us in August for the GAPS, because our model will actually show you why. And once you know why your net profit is this, and why there's no money going into your bank account, or the money that's going in, why it's not higher or lower. And once you know why, it's pretty simple and clear and easy to make some small strategic business decisions to improve them, to your point, progressively over time.
Yeah.
And it's, we see it all the time with our clients and people that go through the GAPS. It's like you can see a light bulb going off. You're like, oh, yeah, I totally get it now. I understand why it feels like I'm not making enough money. I understand why I feel like a hamster and the profit's just not coming. And now once you know why, and you have a framework for easily calculating it for the rest of your career, now that let's go to work. Let's tweak that. Let's improve that a little bit at a time. And a little bit at a time, like you said, results in just success forever.
Yeah. Now, I usually agree with you 100%, but what you said is absolutely true. Once you know why, then you still have to make the decisions.
Totally.
Which are like, oh my goodness. Okay, so I have 12 insurance plans.
Yep.
These 2 are lousy. I'm writing off 72%.
Right.
I should probably get rid of that. And we go, yeah, you should. And they go, well, my sister is on that. Yeah. Or I have a friend on that. And that's a tough thing. And that's why we're coaches. And sometimes you do have to make the decisions.
Right. You do have to make the decisions, and we do have roadmaps to guide you through. But you're right. We looked at it with our clients on Friday. I looked at patient segments. So an actual client with different patient segments of PPOs. And it's like we have 5 PPOs. And these 2, you have very few patients, and you're writing off. Like, you're losing money every time we see these patients. And it's like, why would I ever see those patients again? Let's get rid of them.
Yeah.
Let's improve our profit just a little bit. Let's focus on these. So, all PPOs aren't dumped in the same bucket either.
Right.
When you break them apart and you analyze the numbers, now you can say like, oh, that's why I'm not making any money.
Right.
And so knowledge is power. And if we're making business decisions based on the P&L only, we're missing 75% of the information.
Yeah.
And that's what our GAPS method in our virtual workshop, where you and I are going to walk people through step by step, not only how it works, but what to do with that information. And it's going to be transformative.
Yeah. So I want you to talk about that, and there's going to be a link below to register. But before we do, give us a final wrap up on the energy quotient. If I'm a dentist listening,
the energy quotient is another way to symbolize your profit margin or lack thereof. And I want you, if you're a dentist out there, and I don't, whether you're an associate or owner, it doesn't matter. I want you to look at your product, your dentistry, your clinical skills. And we've all trained to be excellent clinicians, but we can't leverage that clinical skill unless we do it in a strategic way that brings in enough profit. I want us to be fair. I want us to be ethical. I want you to provide great dentistry and do it at a fair price, but you deserve to bring in a profit.
right.
And so we need to understand profit margin. When we put out our output of dentistry, what percentage of those production dollars are going to come back in and filter down into the doctor's actual checking account? That's really what the GAPS does. It's the ultimate equation. Like, great, I produced X amount this month. How much of that do I actually get to put in my bank account after taxes? And it's what the GAPS ultimately answers. And that information is unheard of.
Yeah. You remember this phrase when you got started in dentistry? It's been around forever.
Yeah.
It's not what you produce, it's what you what? Keep.
Yeah, absolutely.
That phrase has so much more complexity now than it ever did. Because it's not what you produce, what you keep. Back in the day, it was, all right, well, you just got to collect the production.
Right.
Some way, somehow.
Yep.
And that might include writing a fee, writing a letter to the PPO that you're on to say, hey, you got to raise my fees because this is getting in the way. Yeah. Now, it's so much more complex. And that's our job, is to take the complex and make it simple. And then you're going to find that when you come to this 2-part webinar series. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So what else do they need to know about registry? So we're going to have a link below.
We're having a link below.
It'll be a 2-part.
2 parts, $95 only. We're gonna walk you through the whole model. We're gonna give you the tool so you can go home and apply your own numbers to it. We're gonna come back a couple weeks later and do an implementation seminar where we're gonna take your questions and we've seen this before, so we'll be able to answer implementation challenges and get you through that. And ultimately, you're gonna leave with the tool. Yeah. And you're going to be able to apply it month over month to your practice and start analyzing and answer that question, why? I
promise you, if you show up, it'll be the one most significant tool you ever use to improve profitability you'll ever have in dentistry.
Agreed.
That's a big promise. So if you attend and that promise isn't fulfilled,
we'll give you your money back.
We'll give you your money back.
Absolutely.
That's how much we believe in it. And we love it. We love it so much. We want you to have it. And so please join us.
Absolutely.
Good stuff.
Cool.
Thanks, brother. So stick around when we say goodbye to everybody else. But thank you guys for listening to the Best Practices Show podcast. Hey, a good part of enjoying your practice is to make sure that you feel good about your effort and what you have left. And that is our job. Our job here at the podcast is give you great information so you create a better practice and a better life. So keep showing up. We're going to keep bringing it. And we will see you guys soon. So have a great day, everybody.